If you want to get out of France, you're going to have to pay tribute to climate change. I'm Scott Ott, and this Right Angle episode with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And gentlemen, yes, the government of France has just announced, as of this story that I'm reading in the British Independent on July 9th, an eco-tax of up to €18, which is some sort of pretend money, on all flights leaving France. That tax will vary. Some short hop flights will be less and the longer flights will be more. And the government spokesperson says this is expected to raise around €180 million annually that would finance daily transportation in France. Stephen Green, doesn't this seem like a nice way to be able to pay for public transit, for example, and heal the planet without ticking off a lot of people who never fly? In other words, the 99%?
No, let me get this straight. They're going to tax flights leaving the country in order to build more infrastructure for cars and trains, which in France are largely diesel and gasoline powered, to drive on.
But you'll be with the
right?
train, Steve. You'll have multiple people in a train, so it'll be more efficient and less damaging to Mother Earth.
Well, it's curious that you're talking about what is more efficient. What was that line in the story? Something about only the tiniest minority of people fly.
Yeah, I'll get that for you, but go ahead.
Yeah, something like that. Well, there's an even tinier minority. It's a fraction of a fraction. You might even say it's the 1% who don't fly on these giant wide-body planes crammed full of people who have all their body parts crammed up against themselves and one another in these ever-shrinking seats. Instead, you have these luxurious private jets flown by the likes of Leonardo DiCaprio. And if noted environmentalists, I should add, and if you're really serious about saving the planet, if you're really serious about reducing wasteful carbon emissions from the tiniest percentage of people putting out the most toxic fumes per passenger, then you're going to have to slap a tax on these private jets leaving the country, probably even the ones entering the country. And I would propose a modest fee of, say, €10,000 per passenger.
Now, Steve, when you said the 1%, I thought you were referring to the people who actually ride public transit. This is...
Is it that many now?
No, I'm not sure it's that high. And by the way, I've got to read this quote to you before I have to send this iPad back to Apple, where it will be ground up and used as mulch. It's totally green. Here we go. Around 5% of the world's population takes flights, but air travel contributes an estimated 2% of the globe's total carbon emissions. And when I first read that, I thought, well, wait a minute, that's not the sequence that you would expect, because 5% are taking flights and they only account for 2% of total carbon emissions. However, I think that's just part of their total contribution to the carbon emissions. Obviously, these people are stupidly doing things like exhaling.
Oh, damn them. Yeah, we got to put a tax on that too. There's a modern progressive version of the old Reagan saw about taxes and government, and it goes like this: if it moves, tax it; if it keeps moving, tax it some more; and if it stops moving, impose a death tax.
Now, Bill Whittle, I saved this part of the story for you because in addition to the normal effect that airplanes could have from their exhaust, polluting the atmosphere and causing global warming, a new study suggests that the overall effects of flying could be far more damaging to the climate than at first thought. The study identified, and wait for it, please, trails left by planes in the sky as a far more damaging effect on the climate than all the carbon dioxide ever emitted from their engines. But it's not what you think, Bill. The tracks, called contrails, linger in the sky as ice clouds and trap heat in the Earth's atmosphere.
Nonsense. They got it exactly right up until the last sentence.
But this is science.
No, it's science-ish.
It's science-y.
Look, we have a lot of we have more air traffic over the United States than the rest of the world combined, and when we went to these introductions of the high bypass turbine engines, which started with the 747, and ever since then, the quiet ones that make the kind of hum instead of the ripping air, older matter jets. These things move a large amount of air on the outside of the jet engine. They're a lot more efficient, but that means there's a much higher volume of warm air up there, which is why the contrails are thicker. But what these contrails do is they don't trap heat. The contrails are a very, very nice parasol. They're just a damn good sunshade is what they are. They lower ground temperatures significantly. They put cloud cover up there where there isn't any cloud cover, and it's up in the upper atmosphere. It's probably taking out 10, 15% of the total sunlight, somewhere in there if I had to guess. It's actually cooling the planet.
So at the very least, Bill, you could say if they are trapping heat, the shading effect counterbalances that and probably nullifies it?
It's not a question of counterbalancing it. I remember, now it was needless to say, it's a pretty small survey, but one guy who was studying global temperatures was saying, man, I really think the shadows from these high altitude contrails are significant. And I have no way to really test it, obviously, because in order to do that, I'd have to shut down air travel all over the United States. And then along comes 9/11, and that's precisely what happens. And although we're talking about a very, very small sample here, 6, 7, 8 days, maybe 2, 3 weeks, he said no, it was exactly right. Temperatures went up what he predicted because the shade effect of these ice crystals went down. But there's a lot to talk about here, Scotty. First of all, I think here's how much fun you can have with statistics. If it turns out that 5% of the population flies, and flying produces 2% of the world's carbon output. If we could just get the entire planet to fly, we would be an enormous net gain. On a more serious note, if we're talking about efficiency and using the money that they're going to add to this tax, that the tax is going to bring in, rather, and then they're going to spend it on local transportation in France, I have a very strong feeling that we are very soon going to get ourselves to the most efficient form of transportation known to man, which is a barge being pulled by an ox. And I think this is, and I'm not really seriously joking here, because on some level, this is what the European elites want. It's what our elites want too. They want the little people. There's something in front of my lens.
Yeah.
It's a chemtrail.
It's a chemtrail. Yeah, I was just going to say contrail.
What they want is they want the little people to be able to travel by barge once every 3 or 4 years, to gather on the side of the pier and hand them their measly potatoes and chickens and bow their way onto this, gigantic, smelly, unsafe raft to be drawn up the Rhine or up the Seine or whatever, so they can have their once every 3-year vacation. It's the same in America. I know people think I'm being flip about this, and I am being flip about it, but what I'm being flip about is very serious. What's the point of being a political elitist if everybody else gets to live as well as you? What's the point? There is a genetic defect in the human gene sequence that makes some people require authority over other people. They have to have it. They have to tell other people what to do. If they're not telling other people what to do, they're not happy. And so when you eliminate nobility and aristocracy and all the rest of these things, and if you take away the means of enforcing your will by being a member of the SA, let's say, or one of these neighborhood KGB, super low level KGB informers for the apartment block. You take these opportunities away from people, what are they going to do? They got to do something. So they look for whatever cause they can find in order to exert control over people. And the thing that they've landed on most recently is, well, you want to save the planet, don't you? Well, kind of, I live here, I guess. Well, then you should do what I tell you. And that's basically it. And Steve also pointed out one other thing, and this applies to this government making this tax as well. Once you understand this, everything becomes crystal clear. Leonardo DiCaprio, when he's questioned about his private jet, says, I fly the jet to go to global warming conferences. I mean, that's what I do with the jet. And so DiCaprio tells you that he has the jet to go to the global warming conferences, but that's exactly backwards. DiCaprio goes to the global warming conferences so that he can have the jet. And what I mean by that is my God.
This is a first.
Sorry.
10 years of doing
Yeah,
this.
yeah. I for one, welcome our new fibrous overlords and would like to remind them that as a trusted member of the media, it can be useful in rounding up other humans to serve in their underground sugar caves.
They're lint caves.
Yeah, there you go. No, but seriously, so I mean it. DiCaprio does the global warming eco tour thing so that he can have his private jet with a clear conscience. Because just the raw hypocrisy of it is everything. So this is what the French government is doing too. They're basically virtue signaling. The people who pass this law can certainly afford the tax. There's not going to be any problem for them. And basically what they're saying is, since only a few of us rich people fly, we're going to put a little tax on there so you know that we're really saving the planet while we jet around to to Antigua or wherever the hell we're going. I find it to be low and mean and dishonest, but them's the cards of the realm these days, I guess.
Can I throw something in here real quick, Bill? Who was the gentleman who did this thing with the vapor trails, the condensation trails?
I don't remember his name.
No.
It was a climatologist who was working on that particular aspect. of it.
So bear with me here. He formed a hypothesis about condensation trails and the weather. He was then able to test that hypothesis in reality, and reality then bore out what his hypothesis predicted. Does the environmentalist movement know about this process?
Oh, what you said was exactly right. He had a theory. He then was able to perform an experiment. The experiment validated his theory, so he was never heard from again.
Yeah.
Look, I actually have respect for real science, and
Absolutely.
one person doing a survey over 3 days is not real science. However, if it had turned out it had gotten hotter then, his theory would have been contraindicated. So while it didn't prove anything, it at least didn't disprove the validity of the theory. And these are the tiny little variables, that these climate models can't take into account, because contrails form at different altitudes and in different densities based on air pressure, based on air temperature, based on the altitude of the flights. So one day you may have a flight where everybody's up there, nobody's leaving contrails, and another day at 32,000 feet, it's like a screen up there,
It's
just join, wink, 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 wink. Anyway, so there.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a sequence of events which both Bill and Steve, I think, have indicated here. And with my very small experience as an elected official in government a few years back, I can see this a little more clearly than I would have had I not served in government. There is an instinct among those who are in the political class to want to control other people. And so as part of that desire to control, the highest and best spin you can put on that is the desire to create a better society, an almost utopianism that says, hey, if only we were in control and we turned the right dials and flipped the right switches, then we could create a better society. One of those dials or switches involves public transit, because the more people you can get on public transit, the less crowded your cities become with automobiles, the less smog there is in the air, back when we used to worry about smog. Of course, to do public transit, you have to have people want it, and people don't. And so the way that you have to fund public transit, therefore, is by making people who don't want it pay for it, even though they're not using it. And this is in the form of higher taxes. And so your utopian vision continues down the path of controlling the movement of people. And at some point, someone in France says, Eureka, j'ai une bonne idée. I have a good idea. This great idea is, climate change alarmism polls really strongly. If we want to get the money to fund the public transit that nobody wants so that we can control the movement of people, so that we can have more power to create a happier society, perhaps we should just call it a climate change tax on airplanes leaving France. After all, who would want to leave France? Now, my theory here comes to its fruition at the end, where I think private enterprise is going to overcome all of this, in a sense, because immediately I expect to see airlines advertising the fact that a part of your ticket price goes to fight climate change. And
Absolutely.
So therefore, I fly so I can save the environment.
We can all be Leo.
For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making Right Angle possible.